In 1993, Final Approach changed the way we hunt waterfowl. Now, over 25 years later, we're back at it. My name's Mario, host of the FA podcast. Let's talk waterfowl tips, tricks, tactics, and more. It's all going down right here with the Final Approach podcast.
What up, Final Approach? It's Mario with all the FA carvers. We're minus Jamie Wells. She's down in South Carolina. Couldn't make it on the trip, so we got Wayne Simkin from Canada, Pat Gunn in the middle from Canada, and from Nebraska, not originally, but just moved Tom Christie. So 25 world championships sitting here, world decoy carving championships. And the thing we wanted to talk about, we're going to do a few of these, but we're going to go technical, let's kind of say, and we're going to talk about, the tools you guys use. We're going to talk wood. We're going to talk everything carving. So we'll talk about, wood and tools and techniques, and we'll explain different techniques. So maybe somebody does want to, get into it, or, talk about, where they can find information and books that you two guys have done, and videos and all kind of other stuff. So maybe let's start real basic. Let's start wood. Everybody uses Tupelo?
Yeah, I believe so. And
best wood, Pat?
Well, we're making our burrs for competition, and Tupelo is for sure the best.
Okay.
If I was going to make a rig of hunting decoys,
yeah,
I'd probably use cedar. White cedar is undoubtedly the best.
Okay.
Yeah,
and and there's other variations of wood you can use for the heads, even on a cedar decoy. But
okay,
cedar is a lot of the old decoys. And the antique decoys were made of cedar.
A lot of high-density cork, too, for bodies on gunning decoys.
Sure. Yeah. Wait, are we doing the white cedar because of the way it's kind of going to hold up in the water, or the weight, or why would you guys pick something like that?
It's weight, like it's very light wood, but still some of the old traditional decoys were still quite hollow.
Okay.
It's a very resilient wood to rot.
Okay, so that's really the basic, probably the main, right,
Yeah.
Pat?
Yeah. There's a chemical in cedar that prevents it from deteriorating and rotting.
There you go.
Unlike some other woods, like basswood will rot very quickly.
Correct.
If it's exposed
to the elements.
Yes,
right.
and Tupelo is the same thing. But when we do our competition decoys, we protect them really well. So
Absolutely.
So they could last. It should last hundreds of years if they're taken care of.
Let me ask this, not to and as we go through this whole thing, like if there's like secrets like you don't want to give up, like I get it. But as far as getting wood, is there a lot of places to find the Tupelo or to find the cedar and stuff like that? Like, is it easily available?
Not easily, no. I mean, especially for I live in Ontario, and I mean the actual access to it is pretty limited. I'll pick it up when I go down to the shows in the southern states, that type of thing. Pat, who has some very good contacts in Louisiana,
right?
Yeah, Tupelo grows in the water, cypress swamps in the southern U.S. and in North Carolina and the Carolinas.
Sure.
So it's grows in very specific areas, and it's not a wood you're going to find in the north.
Correct.
So we have to rely on people that make the effort to harvest the wood in those areas.
Yeah, it's a type of wood too that is just specific to carving. I don't know of any other real
uses
commercial
use
for it.
Right.
Well, and it's getting pricier because it's getting hard to get. And I don't know how it compares with cedar. I'm assuming cedar is a lot more cost effective if you're going to make a bunch of working decoys.
Undoubtedly.
Price-wise?
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly.
Okay.
And now the other thing with cedar too, you may have to end up hollowing those decoys, whereas with
because of the weight.
Yeah, whereas and the same with basswood, but with Tupelo, if you get good Tupelo, it's plenty light for anything you make to be buoyant enough to float really well.
Right, that makes sense. And like Tom said, the cork, there's been cork gunners forever.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. That's a really good material, and it floats well. It's a little heavy, but again, you just design it
And I don't necessarily think you have to. Do you have to seal the cork?
Yeah, you should.
You
Yeah.
should,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's probably been a bunch that have been done that were never
the
sealed.
thing
I'm sure.
floats like a cork.
Right. I mean, it's right. It's legit.
But
So
I think for somebody starting off too, doing their own decoys, cork is a great thing because it's very easy to carve.
Right.
You don't need high-speed grinders or anything. You can do it with a file and sandpaper, and
Right.
it doesn't cut well with a knife.
easiest to use.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of dusty and messy,
Right.
but it's pretty easy to carve.
Yeah.
Like some of the first decoys I did was out of black cork,
Okay.
and it's really messy. Like you come out and you're just covered
Covered.
in little black bitties.
Yeah.
But some of the natural cork that you can get, and it's ground up and compressed into a block
And the first, like, listen, using some of the stuff that I use, which is not so much wood as far as like more so on a chemical based side and resins and stuff like that. The first thing I thought of when you guys were talking, like you said, it was pretty dusty, and then you said you're covered with it. Like, I always think like safety, like you got to have some air filtration. You have to have a mask if you don't have great, like if you're just starting and doing stuff, like you really, especially if you're young and you're going to do this for a while, like you literally need to be careful
Yeah.
in what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Even just sawdust and everything else. I mean, that's something that, maybe, goes by the wayside a bunch, but,
Well, there's some woods not only physically can harm you, but there's some of them are carcinogenic too.
and
Some types of
cedar's
woods.
one of them.
cedar
Yeah,
is
cedar
one.
is not good to breathe. No.
Right.
Especially
So-
if you're grinding,
Right.
you generate a lot of fine dust.
Yes, correct.
And you really need to protect yourself.
And there's a
your
ton
lungs.
of there's a ton of stuff if you get on any of the carving sites or websites or any of those kind of businesses. I mean, you could find all those air filtration systems, or if you need to think like you make your own or whatever, or wear a mask, and there's just certain things you got to do. So that just, I didn't want to go off topic, but
Yeah.
that just made
No,
me
it's
think
a
of that
good
when
point.
you guys
It's
were talking
important.
about that.
I mean, with the natural cork, like if you're using a file or sandpaper,
Sure.
you're not really making fine particles that are going to be floating around, but you should still be wearing. We're all used to wearing masks over the last couple of years.
True.
So even just a mask like that is going to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And glasses, if you're, safety glasses, if you're really hogging big pieces of wood on the, say the Fordham, or you're using the Dremel, or you're putting something pretty, well, probably not the Dremel, but the Fordham, if you're really, chopping some big wood.
You want to have a good apron and keep your sleeves and your shirt away from the rotary grinding.
Do me a favor. Everybody go like this.
Yeah. Still got
Go
them.
ahead, Pat. Like, this is a big deal because, no kidding, everybody has all their fingers.
Yeah.
Great. My first carving tool set, okay, you'll get a kick out of this because you get this, but I got my first, 5-piece set of hand tools in a little box, and my buddy Don Guthrie got it for me, and he wrapped it up, and he gave me one of those boxes, and there was a box of 5,000 Band-Aids, and he's like, here you go.
Essential equipment right
Yeah.
here.
Well, I just say don't let them focus in. I'm sure we've all got a few scars on our hands.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I just wanted to make sure everybody has.
Yeah,
all
no
10.
close-up shots.
Yeah, no. There's no hand models in this bunch.
I cut myself more when I'm chopping something in the kitchen than anywhere else.
Really?
A little cut there.
Well, because you're not paying attention
Yeah.
probably, and you're just going. Oh my
I got
god.
that from a little cut from skinning a deer there a few weeks ago.
Wow.
So okay, so we got wood. Maybe let's talk. I guess the next thing would be to talk. Hand tools versus power tools, and what you guys use. So we'll kind of go down the line, and we can start with Wayne. And you could talk about your progression because you do. You scale, you big, and go down to fine. So maybe go through what you start with and then finish with, maybe.
When I first started with the carving, or what I'm using
Just
now?
all the tools. Just kind of go through. Are you a power tool guy at the start to get? Are you a big I forget what
The
that
draw knife?
The draw knife. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are you starting?
Actually, well, I used to start right with the big Fordham with the big tungsten bit, and I've recently acquired a horse where I can sort of clamp the piece down,
Right.
and I can hog off a lot of wood with the draw knife,
Yeah.
and that's really, and it's cleaner, so I'm not filling my shop up with dust and.
And it's pretty even. Like when you're coming with the draw knife is big and wide, and you
Yeah.
can kind of get
Yeah,
pieces
just to hog
and
off, just kind of get the general round shape of the
Right,
bird, and
right.
and that you just got to be careful with the grain. Tupelo, you've got to. It's very forgiving for going against the grain, where basswood and cedar is not.
Right.
So I can kind of work against the grain a little bit, but you still got to be mindful.
You want to be with the grain all the time if you can
Yeah.
on just about all the woods.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're going to start with the draw knife, and then are you going to switch to a power tool then?
Yeah,
or a
then I'll
Fordham?
go to the high speed, like a Fordham.
Sure.
With a large carbide cuts all on it that
Right.
really, and you're peeling off a lot of wood at a time.
Right.
Making a lot of dust, so you should be wearing a mask at that
And
time.
some filtration, right?
Yeah.
And then you'll just go finer bits on the Fordham.
Yeah.
And then just keep going.
And then just keep going. Then I've got a Geschwein, which is a high speed, about a 50,000 RPM, I believe
Yep.
there.
Yep. I know that one.
And just kind of work my way down with that. And, to a progression of, diamond bits, ruby bits.
Sure.
Cross-cut steel cutters and that type of thing. And then finally sandpaper, which is not my favorite part of the process, but it's
it's a must.
it's a necessary evil. Yeah.
Right. Pat. Okay. Well, what about you? How are you starting and then going
I'm-
through and finishing?
Not too dissimilar from how Wayne works. I learned to carve way back in the 70s, all with hand tools. There's no power tools involved other than my burning tips, which
Right.
we used to put in the finest detail. And so I'll probably bring it a little bit further than Wayne with my hand tools. I'll use the draw knife to basically shape the roundness of the bird. Then I'll work the major feather groups in with various size gouges. Again, one of the advantages of that is you get nice wood chips coming away, no
Right.
dust.
Right. With the hand tools, right? With the gouges and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's almost it's something. Even though I at some point I'm using power tools, I haven't given up those original techniques, and there's almost something therapeutic in seeing those little
Pieces come off.
Yeah, pieces of wood coming off the block, and
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So that's how I learned to carve from the very beginning.
Right.
And of course, as you progress through the carving process, you're going with more refined tools.
Right.
Until you're down to, with the decorative birds, creating feather barb texture with either a stone or burning tool.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's almost. I would think most carvers are using some
Like a combination of everything.
some variety of those techniques in the end to create their birds.
Yeah.
And of course the big thing for me is, especially when it comes down to laying out feathers, I'm always visualizing it as a composition. I'm composing feathers to make them look good. Now, you could randomly put feathers on, and they'd probably be accurate,
Right.
but I like to compose them so that they look good, so your eye kind of flows through the surface when you
Sure.
look at the finished bird.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's always a priority for me, and at a certain point in the carving.
Okay. Tom, anything? I mean, just add what you do if it's different or similar.
Yep.
Just kind of walk us through you.
Very similar. When I started carving, I was carving my own hunting decoys, and that was primarily hand tools because I was doing it in my basement and I couldn't afford to generate a lot of dust. So just hogging off a lot of wood with sharp hand tools was good. I do want to give a pitch, too, for a good bandsaw. Before you start carving, most people need a good deep-throated bandsaw, like 12 to 14 inches throat on it, so that you can get a block of Tupelo or whatever you're
Through it and get your pattern
because
started, or you're a little bit of a shape of, like, not just a square block or a rectangle.
Right. Just do a side profile and then a profile down, a couple of cuts, and you've taken off a lot of wood. Then you can start hacking on it.
Yeah, because that would, I mean, without the bandsaw and you'd have to really go to town on some.
Yeah.
I mean,
I have used a hatchet, and some people do that, but normally I'm bandsawing first, and then like on a big goose, I used a hatchet to hog off wood.
I know I have a picture of you sending me the hatchet with the live honkers.
Yeah.
I remember that. I was
And
like,
it gave me new appreciation for those people that use a hatchet to carve. You do that for about a minute, and your wrist is ready to go limp. But it is an effective way to get a lot of the corners off of the bandsawed block. And then like these guys, I moved to grinding later with better dust control. So I've got really good dust control. I wear a respirator when I grind, along with the dust collection equipment.
Sure.
And I use a Fordham and a Guess Wine for the detail work.
Yeah, I mean, those are probably the two most popular. I don't want to say like nobody uses a Dremel, but that Geschwein is like, that's like top.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like
and
a
when
great
somebody's first starting
tool.
out, I mean, a Geschwein it's a pretty significant outlay of cash.
Right.
And so I think you'd want to make sure that
That you're in it.
you're in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still use the little marathon model and it's pretty cost effective.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so there's depending on your budget, there's definitely something
Right.
out there. But I would say don't get something really cheap
No.
if you're going to do it for a little
Yeah,
bit, because
yeah.
it's going to just crap out on
Yeah.
you. It's gonna.
And if you do get something decent and you decide that this isn't the direction I want to go, it's pretty easy to find somebody that would pick that up off
Correct.
you.
Correct. Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of bits and stuff over the years, I've probably accumulated, I don't know how many thousands of dollars worth of bits, and I probably use a couple of $100 worth of them.
Right.
But it just, I go to the show
You
and it's
gotta
just,
have the tools.
I find something that's, I can't live without this.
Oh, yeah.
Kinda like
I didn't know
golf
it
gloves.
existed before I saw it, but
So, and then so here's one of the things we need to do as well. So if we're talking about different styles of decoys, decorative, and we'll go through a couple of the different, let's say, versions or categories. I don't know what really to say there, but would it change how you start? It would change obviously how you finish, but does anything change how you start? Let's ask Tom. We'll start with Tom. Does it change, like if you're doing something decorative versus a gunning? Like does it change at the start or just at the finish on tools?
It doesn't change at the start for me because you start with a pattern and
Right.
developing a good pattern for your bird using references online, photographs, whatever you can get your hands on to
Right.
do an accurate profile of the bird you're trying to carve, because a lot of people rush through the pattern development and go right to the carving and then end up wondering why this doesn't look like a mallard.
You have to
when
have
you're
a
done.
good base to start.
you gotta
a good
start
pattern,
there.
A good idea.
And then depending on the nature of the carving, there may be different things you want to do. A gunning decoy, you want it less detail,
Right.
less susceptible to water damage, banging around in the boat or the sack.
More durable. Right.
Yeah, you have to pay more attention to durability.
Right.
And decorative carvings, Pat is really, and Wayne are more expertise on that. They can talk about.
Yeah. Well, then so Pat. So tell me, we're going to talk about explain a gunning decoy versus a decorative. Like gunning, you're just going to have not as much detail. You're going to paint the detail in.
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. There's less detail, and your objective's quite different, of course.
Right.
You're simplifying things. You're making things less fragile on a gunning decoy.
That's a huge point,
Yeah,
correct.
you don't want them to.
It can't
if
break.
you're making a real hunting decoy that you're going to hunt with, yeah, it's got to be really durable.
Yeah, there can't be wingtips coming off the back, or if you make a sprig, that sprig better be
Yeah.
And you want a paint job that you're going to be able to touch up quickly.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. So, comparing that to the decorative birds, there's really no limit to how fine you can go with those.
Yeah, you could go all the way down to like we were talking, Wayne, about having a burning tool and burning in your feathers,
Yes.
like going that deep.
The extremity, there's no limit. The bills have the most intricate detail on them. The feathers, we undercut feathers, we lift feathers, sometimes we insert feathers.
Right.
And the fragility isn't a factor, because these are
They're showbirds. I mean,
they're showbirds, and in competition they're judged the criteria is to represent the live bird
Right.
at the most extreme level.
Right. Right.
And then the one thing that I do, not everybody does this, but when I'm doing the preparation for a decorative decoy, almost always I'll model it in clay ahead of time.
Gotcha.
And so I've got it's like an artist doing a painting. They'll do maybe a quick pencil sketch to get work out the design of the painting. Well, I do the same thing in 3 dimensions with clay. So I work out the design. The detail doesn't matter. It's just the animation in the bird. Some areas, if you have wing exposed, you'll sculpt that in the clay. Then that gives you a really, really good guide when you start working in wood. Wood is unforgiving, whereas clay
you could just
you can
put
add
some more on, take some off, like super
Exactly.
easy. Like you can't do that with wood.
Yeah.
Right.
I always know if I'm pleased with the model that I make in clay, I'll be definitely pleased in wood because it just gets better.
Well, and then like you said, like say the mistakes, like if you running into a certain area of feathers and you figure something out while you're doing the clay and you mess it up and you got to do it a different way, like you'll know to do that at the wood before you get there.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So that's a great idea,
Yeah.
but like of course you're putting more time into the clay, right? But that's going to save you in the long run.
Yeah.
Just like when Tom's doing his sketches and he does super detailed sketches, like that's his guideline, just like you're doing clay, like that's
right.
his like, hey, if I do it on paper and I know where I'm going and I sketch the feathers in, I got a better template and it should be a little, I don't want to say faster or easier, but you can follow way better.
And it's more forgiving. If I gouge a little too much wood out, a little Bondo on a gunning decoy isn't going to hurt anything.
Right.
You can't do that on decorative decoy. You can't
don't
make
want
those
that.
kind of errors.
The thing about the clay too is I work quite quickly with the clay, so it's quite spontaneous. Sometimes there's a looseness there that I really like, and that transfers to the wood.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big advantage too, and that's what you want in a decorative decoy at a high level. You want nice, loose, live-looking bird that you can duplicate initially or create initially in clay.
Right. So Wayne, let's talk about this. I'll throw it to you. So Pat's doing clay. Tom's sketching. We have different ways of getting where we need to get. So now we have a gunning decoy versus a decorative. And my you could explain this better, but obviously my vision is okay. On the gunning decoy, we're going to do a smoothie, and then we're going to paint our detail in. Whereas a decorative, we are going to carve and burn the feather detail in, and then the paint is going to also just take it to the next level. So is that accurate, or can you explain more, on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you're doing a gunning bird, you're going to want something that's going to project well. So you're going to have some pretty high impact colors, like on the Canada Goose here. That want that nice white rump with the dark head, and it creates a lot of contrast.
Right.
And focus is the birds will be drawn, grab their attention, and hopefully come into your spread. Do the same type of thing with the decorative pieces. You want to grab the viewer's eye, but you want to pull them into the piece. And as Pat was saying, you can kind of lay out some feather tracks that are really interesting and just further pull your audience into the piece. I mean, and in terms of the final detail, like. There's some guys that'll be burning 80, 100, 120 lines to the inch.
Oh, yeah.
To get that nice velvety look on the birds. And you're creating feather splits and highlighting quills and when you're painting, and it's all to accent, like everything's working together to
achieve the end result.
Yeah.
And you talk about, the final approach birds and what you guys have done, and we always have to exaggerate the depth of the carving and the burning in, or I shouldn't say burning in, but the stoning in and getting the detail, just because we have to convert it to a mold and pick up all that detail. But on a look at Pat's wood duck. Like I'll start there. Like Pat's got all these raised feathers. So like our birds in our line of decoys, it's almost like it's like I would call it a decorative gunning decoy. Like it's
Right.
best of both worlds because
Right.
we have to be durable. It's going to be made out of plastic so it doesn't break. I mean, you have Tom's pintail. You know what I mean? Like that's flexible, but it's not going to break.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of gunning and kind of decorative. And then you go into the colors or the detail, and Pat's got feather splits on the wood duck, and Tom's got all the vermiculation on the side, and you got legs sticking out, you know what I mean, and big feathers on the side. Like it's a combination of getting the best result we can, because we're going to get deep detail as much as we can on the carving, and then we're going to really accent the paint to really highlight those areas to make it pop even more.
I was going to say that the carving on those is important for these hunting decoys, because light plays into the projection from a distance too.
Sure.
So being able to see some shadows on feather groups, really especially from a distance, adds to not just color but also shape and shadow, adds to how the bird projects from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we always talk about like, okay, so you could look at your white patch in the front on the pintail, right? And then you could look at Wayne's rump on the white, and even Pat's rump on the wood duck, right? There's no surface area on any of the decoys that has no texture or feather detail, because once you have a flat surface, that's when you start getting a shine, and you don't have that texture, you don't get that look. So, I mean, those are the details that we have gone above and beyond, and we talk about those all the time in the little details, but making sure, like, okay, like who the heck's going to look underneath the wood duck and care? You know what I mean? Or who cares if that has, if Wayne's goose has, like feather waves as it goes through, and then all the striations of feathers, carved in. Well, we care because we know that's going to look better when you throw like one color on it.
Yeah, it's going
Because you
to
can't
reduce
highlight
the
that.
shine out in the marsh
Right.
as well.
Right.
It's a manufacturing paint job, so they're limited in how much detail
Right.
they're going to be able to put.
Right.
in
So
the
we
paint.
got to make sure like it pops on the water when a customer gets it, and the way it looks. And obviously on the hunting scenario, you're trying to reduce shine, because you're trying to reduce shine in the spots that a real bird doesn't have shine, and then accent the shine on, like, say, the wood duck head, where there is iridescent.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, it's not really a shine there. That it's more of a highlight. Like you don't
Sure.
want that,
you don't want
The
that bright
flash,
shine,
yeah.
but you have that
and they've really
iridescent.
captured that well.
Yeah, you have that iridescent. So, so let's talk about paint. So we're, whether we burn detail in or we stoned it in with a power tool or whatever. So I'll start with Pat. So we get to well, let me ask one question to everybody really quick, and then I'll go right to Pat. What kind of paints do you use?
Acrylic.
oils.
Okay, so let's start with Pat, and then I want to go to you because I want to hear about the oil. So go ahead.
Yeah.
And then you chime in, Tom, if there's something, we'll come to you
Yeah.
right after on the acrylic, since you guys both use it. But then I want to listen to Wayne.
Yeah, of course, the if you're painting a bird, your primary objective is to duplicate the colors on the real bird, and that takes a skill in mixing your paints to match colors, and also knowing the sequence of application of the paint too. You can mix a color that looks like the real bird and put it on, and it might not look quite right, but if you use a series of steps of overlaying paint, you'll get quite a different effect in the end.
Absolutely.
So that takes some skill in learning how to paint and how to apply the paint, and then being able to anticipate what's going to happen over those series of steps.
Well, and let me throw this right at you. A base coat, you know what I mean? If you start with a base color, that's going to also change everything. You know what I
Well,
mean?
yes.
Or if if you're going to make your base white, or if it's a hen and you're going tan or some, version of that, like, or if Wayne's starting with white or whatever on the goose, like everything comes into play right off the start immediately.
Yeah, well, with the acrylic paints, what is underneath the paint that you're putting on has a big impact on the final appearance of that color. So, and the only way to learn that is to, well, I guess you could learn from somebody that's teaching you,
Sure.
but also actually doing it and learning what's happening as the paint dries and
you're layering, and as you layer it, like you said, in different colors.
Yeah. Now, on my decorative birds, I don't only duplicate you might say the pigmentation color of the feathers, but then I bring it to another level. When you look at a lot of feathers on birds are translucent. So what you actually see on the real bird, you're actually seeing layers of feathers.
Right.
So I try to create the illusion that you can see through layers of feathers by creating translucent effects. And that kind of kicks your painting to another level. And then what I also do is it's like an artist working in 2 dimensions on a canvas. They can paint the image of an object and make it look 3-dimensional on a 2-dimensional surface.
Right.
So I do the same thing on my 3-dimensional surface by painting the illusion of light hitting the surface.
Yeah, because like if you, like say an artist made a painting and put it on the wall, if it was just a flat 2D, you would just look at it and walk right by it, or just, but then if you're like you're saying, the depth and like looking in, like if somebody had it on the wall and you walked by and you didn't know where you were, you would almost look out and look like you're looking through a window outside. Yes. And you could see like, oh, that tree looks like it's 30 yards away, and then the bushes is right here, and then there's a deer standing, well, it feels like it's 10 feet away, and that gives you that reference of depth as you look through, and that's what you're talking about with those different colors.
That's right.
And
that's
layers.
Right. So even though I've carved some of the shapes of those feathers, if you paint it very monotone, it'll, even though you've carved the shape in, sometimes it'll all of a sudden it looks flat. But
and you don't want that. You want to have that layer.
So
levels.
what I'll do is I'll exaggerate the shape with shadow and highlight, and then no matter how, if you're looking at close or far away, you get the feeling of shape and dimension on the surface
just from paint.
Yeah. So that again, that's bringing the painting process to another level, and in these competitions, if you want to excel at the high level, that's the kind of thing you have to do.
That, right?
Yeah.
What do you want to add anything on the acrylics?
I would just add some of the advantages of acrylics.
Yeah, let's hear that.
And I've done both, but I started with acrylics. They use water as a solvent, which I like because I can rinse my paints out in the sink and not worry about what's going down the drain. They dry faster.
Okay.
And I've used them for 35 years and I've been successful with it, so I just kind of stuck with it. You do have to kind of develop blending techniques with acrylics because oils, and Wayne will talk about that, blend much easier and nicer because the medium stays wet longer.
I gotcha.
And you can really do some cool blending and color combinations with oils, but you can do that with acrylics as well. You just have to learn how to maneuver the paint, and it's been great.
Let me ask you this before I go to Wayne: is like if I'm a starting carver or painter, would I want to make it easier on myself and use acrylic, or would I want to use oil? Like if I was.
Well, I'm an acrylic guy, so I would say use acrylic.
Okay, then let's go to Wayne.
But Wayne, I'll counter that.
So give me the advantages of like you using oil, and if I was say I just wanted to start a gunning decoy, would I just use an oil, or would I use acrylic, or what's easier?
When I first started, I accidentally picked up some oils and hated it, and it just the drying process was too long. I just didn't know how to manage the paints. And then I went to acrylics, and I used acrylics for a long time. And I switched over to oils about 12 years ago or so. And I still use the same type of application techniques that I was using with the acrylics, but I found with the oils that it gives me more open time, like what Tom was saying, so I can mix colors right on the bird. So if you want to create some highlights, you can, put a little bit of yellow on some green and just kind of scribble that in, and it mixes up and gives you.
It mixes right on the bird.
Exactly.
Like you don't have to mix here on your plate and go.
No, you can apply it right on the bird, and if you don't like it, you can just kind of keep scrubbing it, and it'll fade back into where it was. And
so it's got some more forgiveness almost, right?
If you're careful, yes.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Now I think the biggest thing I tell anybody that's getting into oils, you've got to learn when to give up the fight. Yeah.
Well, I want to hear more about that, because that sounds about something that I need to learn. Like, this is when you give up, Rod.
Yeah. No. If the color's starting to get muddy on you, or just kind of getting away, put it down, because you will not win. So let it.
That's good advice.
Yeah. Whereas with acrylics, you can just let that set, and then you can go right back at it within 10 minutes.
And paint over it.
Yeah.
Right.
And with the oils, like most colors, I'll have them, so if I'm painting one night, the next night I can be right back on it again. And I'm painting very thin, especially on the decorative pieces. You don't want to fill in your detail or anything, so your paint application is very thin. And I find the richness of color.
Okay.
Like the color that I'm mixing on the palette
Yeah.
is the same color that paint's going to be when it dries. And with the acrylics, I find that sometimes it kind of
varies.
changes a little bit on me.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter if you're using acrylics or oils. Use high quality paints, and buy the best brushes you can afford.
Right, because that plays into it, and we can talk about that.
Yeah.
So basically, if I was an oil-based painter, I would have a shirt that on the back it would just say "No one to give up the fight."
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
There's one more aspect of
go.
oil versus acrylic too. There are two schools of thought on durability. For like a hunting decoy, a lot of people prefer oil-based paints because they're very resistant to wear and tear and water and that. But I've seen a lot of great acrylic hunting decoys that, as long as you put them on right and seal them up right, they last a long time.
Well, you got to look after them. I mean, plain and simple.
Sure.
Yeah.
So give me some. So on the oil-based side, I'm not saying we're here to promote anything, but okay. So what's we talk about a Fordham and the Guess Wine, and so what's a type of oil-based paint that is, say, top of the line? Is there a couple that you're using that would kind of help somebody? Because listen, you could ask a question online and on a page, and you're going to get whoever's promoting what. But you guys do this for a living, so you've used a bunch of stuff and what's quality.
Yeah.
So
I mean, Winsor Newton is probably the most popular one that's out there. That's a high. That's a high-end line.
Yep.
Gamblin is another good one.
Okay.
That
and those are all oil.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've used the Windsor.
Yeah, and you'll see some that are more geared towards students.
Yes.
And you'll see them at I don't know if I can mention the name Michaels or something like that.
Yeah,
that kind of gears
absolutely.
towards hobbyists and that.
Absolutely.
And I would say to create really high-end pieces, stay away from them, because you pick up a tube of I'm going to say cadmium red, and one tube might be $10 and another tube is going to be $35. Well, that $35 tube is probably going to last you a lifetime. And it's
so
I
don't
figure
be
I'm worth
worried
the
about
investment.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Pat. So give me some acrylic paints, and I'll ask Tom if he uses something different or whatever, because I've used both. So I've used the Windsor. I'm familiar with that. So
Yeah, there's a couple different ones that seem to be popular, and one of the key things, some acrylic paints, when they dry, basically acrylic paint is the pigment in a medium, and the medium is kind of a plastic-based medium, and some acrylic paints, when they dry, they kind of look like they have a plastic look to them, just that sheen that comes off them, which is not what we want.
correct.
So we found a number of other types of paints.
And you
that,
don't have to give up any secrets too. I said that before.
Nope.
So if there's something
Yeah.
that you use that you don't want, I'm serious that you
Yes.
don't want
Yeah.
anybody else to know. I get that. Like you guys are always in competition. So I'm not looking for secrets on how you.
Yeah.
I've got a notepad
Yeah.
here
Oh,
under
I'm
the
looking
table.
here.
Tom, we're recording. I got it.
Keep asking him.
We're recording. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is in different brands of paints, the binders that hold the pigment are really important.
Correct.
If you have weak binders that don't hold the pigment well, then that paint's not going to be very durable.
That's right.
And again,
So
it's another
the
thing.
higher dollar, the better that medium's going to be.
Well,
or would you think?
not
or
necessarily?
Not necessarily.
No,
Okay.
not necessarily.
Okay.
The pricing isn't
would
is
think
the
that, but-
biggest. No, isn't
Okay.
the biggest factor. It seems like different brands have developed different types of binders.
Okay.
And the one that we did a lot of experimentation with it, and it became very popular. It's made by Decoy, Traditions Acrylics.
Yep.
Now that isn't made as a fine art paint, but we found that the binders are really
Really good.
incredibly tough, and they hold the pigment really well. They also dry very matte, which simulates the look of real
Very
feathers.
important, right?
Yeah, so there's been some with the pandemic. A lot of these paint companies have had problems producing paints, and I know that paint line there's some colors that are difficult to get too.
I gotcha.
And I'm not sure what the long-term effects are going to be in the availability of that paint. But anyway, it's
You don't want it to fade or change. I mean, you don't want to paint. You don't want to paint a Mallard Drake and then you come back the next morning and it's a common merganser. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you don't want the color to fade and it's something like you go,
Yeah.
whoa, what is that? Like so, yeah, you're talking about the mediums and the color and the color fastness, let's say, and it's staying. So
Yes,
you want to
yes.
have quality.
yes, and the toughness of the paint.
Right.
Especially if you're doing a gunning decoy and you want to use acrylic
Oh.
paints. We had one fellow that he runs actually a supply business, and he did a little experiment. He painted a wooden wood duck with this Traditions paint, and he left the duck floating in a pond by his house for a whole year. He took that duck out, and of course it had green scum on it and everything.
Sure. The
He
scum
cleaned-
line right on it, right?
He cleaned it off and everything, and he said it looked like the day I put it in the water. So that was, he was doing an experiment on his own because he was selling the paint and he wanted to make sure it was
It
good.
was good. So
Yeah.
okay, so what place is that if you want to say? Because there are some great places and online places that have that knowledge that somebody can go to and
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah, well, if you want to buy supplies to make hunting decoys, that fellow in Michigan, Willie McDonald.
I was just going to say Willie's Duck
yeah,
Blind or whatever, right?
Yeah, his business is called the Duck Blind. You
Yep.
can find it online, and
That's the guy.
And he supplies cork. He has all kinds of different other materials and things that he sells, and he more probably oriented towards the people that do gunning decoys.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about you, Tom? What anything on the acrylic side as far as
I-
what brand or
I use Traditions, but also Josanya is a
Yep,
brand
I've
that
used that.
I've had great luck with over many, many years. And I use some airbrush paint called Chroma,
Yep.
and those are the ones that. And then I seal the decoys because
After all the paint's on, you seal it.
with a top secret sealer
Perfect.
called Deft. No, called
You don't
Dull,
have to say it.
Dull Coat.
Yep.
And that has been a great lacquer sealer. And then I may touch that up with something to give it a little more sheen because
Sure.
Dull Coat is pretty flat.
Right, it is flat.
I normally give them a couple of good coats with that, and I've never had a problem with that. But I got used to the Josanya
Sure.
colors,
I'm
and
very
kind
familiar
of
with
you
that.
get
Yep.
used to it over the years.
Yeah.
And you can get those at any Dick
Yeah.
Blick or any of the big
I was just going
art
to say
supply
that's
stores.
a great art supply store too, the Dick Blick. Is there any other places that you look for stuff, or So let's just talk that really quick. Like as far as like, it doesn't matter if it's paint or carving materials. Is there any place or online or anywhere that you guys have all? I know we can go right through of for somebody who wants a carve or who's in it or needs help? Like, is there anything where you would direct them?
Willie is a good resource. There's a company called James Company.
Yes.
Jaymes, I think. And he's been in it a long time, has all kinds of reference materials for people.
And we're going to talk
started.
about that in a minute too. Anywhere else or?
Well, I was going to mention James Company too. And years ago, there used to be several really dedicated suppliers for decoy carvers, but a lot of them have gone by the wayside. And there's a Greg Durant's company, and that's another one.
Greg Durant, you said?
Greg Durant's, yes.
MDI, are they still?
Yeah, MDI, I think there's
It's another good wood carving company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything, Wayne, that you...
Yeah, there's, KV carving supplies out in Eastern Canada.
Oh, yeah, and Razor Tip.
Yeah, Razor Tip.
That's those are two Canadian ones.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah,
Well, and that
Merkel's
helps
out.
because maybe sometimes getting stuff over the border or what, I mean,
Yes.
whatever, I don't know, but yeah, that helps.
Yeah, like Razor Tip, he's over in Saskatchewan.
Oh, okay.
And
Oh,
he's
that's
got a
cool.
complete line. He's actually created his own line of burning tips
Oh, awesome.
and burners that are really fantastic.
Oh, crap. I don't know that one. I actually might look at that. That's cool.
Yeah, and he's got all.
Where in Saskatchewan is he? Do you know?
Saskatoon.
Oh, crap. We go right through there all the time. Does he have a storefront or is he just
Yeah.
online?
No, he's got a storefront.
Oh, yeah.
He's kind of back in
Sounds
the
like a
downtown
stop.
area, but
Sounds like, bro, I'll make sure I
Yeah.
write that down. Seriously,
Yeah.
we go through there all the time to go to Tyler's up at Saskatchewan Goose Company. I'm doing that. Holy
Yeah.
crap.
But I'd say too, like go to your local art supplier.
Absolutely.
Like when you're looking for paints, brushes, that type of thing.
Let's talk that. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Let's
talk to the
brushes.
people there. The closest one to me was a company called Curry's Art Supply, and I got to know the owner of the store pretty well, and he was really knowledgeable on, especially
that's
when I
cool.
was getting into the oils and helped me out with the oils and the brushes and that type of thing, and just kind of helped me fine tune my techniques. And
Is there? So let's talk brushes really quick, and then I want to hit reference. But brushes. Is there a brand or I mean, you want to get the top brushes, but I mean, I could tell you that I'm probably not as versed in what the best brushes are. So is there something that you gravitate to? And I'll ask all you guys.
well, Raphael has a real nice line. I don't know how available they are now. And then there's
Okay.
but I was using like Klinsky brushes, and that's for doing fine detail stuff. And the advantage to them is if you're using like a number 4 or 5 Klinsky, that you can get a real nice load of paint in your brush and go a long time with painting
that.
the fine lines. And,
Right.
and that's one of the things I found is actually is an advantage with the oils because it doesn't dry quickly.
So it's always wet on the brush, and you can go further.
Exactly.
Right. I
And
gotcha.
when you're painting, as your brush is running out of paint, it kind of fades a bit, and then just kind of pulls out to nothing. Whereas with the acrylics, it just kind of goes and stops.
Yeah.
There's like an abrupt stop.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, it might sound kind of trivial, but I found it like really nice that you can just kind of get that nice fade of.
Well, I'm
of
sure if
paint.
you were like a pinstriper, you'd want to go fade to nothing and then come right
Yeah,
back.
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you'd want to keep that line going.
Yeah.
Is there some brushes, Pat, that you obviously not giving up the secret squirrel brushes, but
No, but there's I think there's it's probably important to talk about the different styles of brushes.
sure,
that I
go for
use.
it. Yeah, go for it.
And you've got general application of paint, maybe over a big area, and you can use fairly wide brushes. I like what they call the
Cat's tongue?
cat's tongue. Yeah, so they're kind of almost shaped like a feather on the end. Yeah. So and I'll use I can apply large volumes of paint over a big area. With
Is
those.
it more round?
Yes.
Like
yes.
a filbert shape.
Yeah, filbert. That's
Okay.
the exact one. Filbert. That's
Okay,
they call
I
it
gotcha.
filbert, as opposed to a flat, which is
Absolutely.
straight across the end. So and then I'll use some smaller synthetic brushes. Those cats or the filbert ones, I use synthetic brushes.
Gotcha.
Just no need to use a expensive brush for
Right.
that. And the same thing with you have some smaller round brushes for smaller areas to just application, and then for blending, I have 2 different brushes I use for blending. In big areas, if I have a big blend, I use I use a fan blender and a stiff fan blender, and you can really move the paint around real easily with that. And wet into wet, I'm applying them on and swishing them together and blending them together.
Right.
And then for smaller, finer blending, I use what is known as the Pat Godden Special Blending Brushes.
Are you getting this, Tom?
Oh, I've got them.
Yeah, we all got them.
So anyway, they would. I think have you used them on oil paint?
Yep.
Because
They work great.
Yeah. Okay.
So is
they'll
it
use
your
oil.
is it your line of brushes or like?
I developed those probably 35
Long
years
time
or
ago.
more
do you sell them?
I have some, but I now I have
This I didn't know. So
I have another James company that manufactures them, and then I made a deal. He can put my name on it, and then
And those
I
are the
sell them
brushes
as
that
well.
you so they're like Pat Godden Signature Series brushes.
Yeah, and they're short little brushes that are real fluffy on the end.
Yep.
And they're just stiff enough that you can move the paint around.
Gotcha.
And they come in different sizes. So if you're doing a little tiny songbird, you got a tiny little area that you want to blend, you got a
You
little
can do
tiny
it.
brush you can. Or whereas if you have a bigger area, there's a bigger brush that's that
For
you
blending.
can blend. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then the next level of brush is the Klinsky Sable. Now, when we say Klinsky, that's not a brand. That's the style
That's
of
a
hair.
style, right?
Because every brand of brush will usually have their highest end brushes will be Klinsky Sables. And the Klinsky Sables are from the, what is it? Is it the Martin?
What? Yeah. What's actually? It's a European Martin. It's
the
a
hair-
Sable,
Yeah.
right?
It's the hair that comes from that particular animal. And the highest end brushes anywhere are the Klinsky Sables. And those, of course,
And those will be in different brands. Just that,
You
but
can
that
get 'em in
Klinsky
different
Sable
brands.
is just the animal
and
hair.
I like, I use a lot of the Raphael brushes that Wayne mentioned too.
Sure.
They're pricey. You can buy tiny little brushes, maybe $30.
Yeah, but how many of those brushes you still have, Wayne? Since you bought, like, you still have them all, probably. Well,
No,
pretty
they
damn
do-
close, right?
Yeah.
They will wear out though.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are going pretty hard on 'em,
Yeah, you
like-
take care of them as well as you can, but
Right.
they still wear.
Yeah.
And then I'll take those old brushes, and I have other uses for those old worn out brushes.
I guarantee it.
Or they become mixing brushes.
Or
that's
something
kind
else.
of at
Sure.
the end of the
Better
line.
Nothing
time.
gets wasted, right?
No.
Yeah.
So what about you, Tom? Is there a
I'm an advocate for cheap brushes.
Let's hear it then. Let's hear it.
Yeah, the style of painting that I do, there's a golden Taclon is the synthetic fiber, and you can get them in Craftsmart or Crafter's Choice in your Hobby Lobbies
Sure.
or your Michaels.
Yeah.
They're very cheap, but the way I paint, I really work a brush hard,
Okay.
and they're very durable and they're inexpensive. The only exception to that is and you can get them in big, wide, flat shapes or
All kind of
filbert
shapes,
or
right.
angles. The exception is the detail brush, and I'm still using a synthetic brush as opposed to a Kolinsky.
Okay.
Less expensive, but they point up nice.
Okay.
And I think the latest one I'm using is a King Art brush.
Okay. Is there? Do you feel like on those line of maybe say inexpensive brushes, are you going through them quicker, or what are you seeing?
They last forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
The exception is I use a 1/8 inch chisel shape for a lot of my detailed scrubbing. I go through quite a few of those
Okay.
because you're
'Cause you're
really
doing a lot
working
of
them
it.
hard. Yeah,
I gotcha.
But
Okay.
but they last forever.
So like, I should have did this earlier, but okay. So we went through all that stuff, but at least we're talking about supplies and stuff like that. So let's take something and go all the way back to reference. And obviously, there's a ton of reference and patterns. We could do this certain section. I should have did it earlier, but we're looking at just products and buying stuff and doing whatever. But at the start, you need to start with a pattern, and you need to have reference material. So obviously, there's a million pictures, whether you take your own and blow some up, or look online, or there's places where you can buy pictures and buy reference material or buy a pattern. You could buy pattern books now. There's I'll have each one of you guys talk about anything like that, but there's so and obviously we can't go through all of it because there's so much. You have pattern books, and everybody's got, like, there's so many things that would just blow your mind. But is there any sources or something where maybe, and like I said, you don't have to give up your your secrets, but is there anything that's helpful there for somebody starting out, or guys and gals who are carving, and maybe this will help them? We'll start with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I use Flickr, Google, all those picture search engines are great references for good profiles. I did want to put a little pitch in for my YouTube channel. I just started this. I don't make any money on it.
That. Absolutely.
But starting to do some from beginning to end, like one of the videos is how do you make a pattern.
Right.
One of the videos is how do you bandsaw, and rough out a decoy. So that's a good reference that I'm hoping to build content over time to help people get started that might want to carve.
Right, and
there.
tips and as you go and stuff like that. I think that's huge. I mean, before, when it was just books and the library that you guys said you started, grabbed a book out of the library. I mean, there wasn't much. Now there seems to be like an overload, but that should help everyone be a little, like, I would say, be a little more efficient on their time. You don't have to scour the world to get a pattern or a pictures.
Yeah.
Right, Pat? What do you think?
Yeah, well, you can find images of real exotic birds that
Sure.
Some a long time ago, before the internet, it was almost impossible to find
Right.
images except the odd picture here or there. You can find all kinds of great stuff on the internet now. But I've got books at home in the little library beside where I work that's just loaded with books with bird pictures, and that's what was my reference way back at the beginning. Plus, there were times I had opportunities to photograph live birds myself.
Oh yeah.
So I have binders
Nothing like that.
full of 35 millimeter slides loaded with, and I had some aviculturalists that had some really great birds. One fellow was specialized in sea ducks and stuff, and which are really difficult to find in captivity.
Right.
And I had access to his aviary, and when I was doing the research for my one pattern book, which was sea ducks and mergansers.
Yeah.
So I gathered all kinds of great images right in his aviary.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, and then I remember the wildfowl carving book would come all the time. I would get it, and there would always be a pattern. They would always have one pattern in there or whatever that you could pull out and use or whatever. But there was, now there's so much, and you can buy patterns of whatever you want to do. You can buy a pattern immediately. Wayne, is there something that you look at or?
Yeah, I have a lot of frozen birds. Like, I've been fortunate enough through my hunting career that gathered up a few specimens, and I've done a fair bit of taxidermy too. So I do my own taxidermy, and Pat was talking about doing a clay mold, and sometimes what I would do is actually mount the bird in the pose that I wanted to do. And
Perfect.
you can kind of work away with that. You just got to be careful with a mounted bird. It's going to shrink and pull some feather growth, so just be mindful of that. Photographs are obviously a huge thing, but you kind of mentioned about blowing a photograph up and creating a pattern from that you got to be really careful, because most photographs are done at an oblique angle. So you're going to get distortion, or if the bird's twisted a little bit, the head's going to be a little bit larger than the body. And so you just got to be really careful.
It might be out of proportion a little bit, so you really have to be aware of that as you're doing stuff like that.
They'll take a measurement of the bill and say, okay, I'm going to blow up my wood duck photograph, so the bill's 1 inch and 3/8 long, but the body's only going to end up being this long. And it's like I say, you just got to be careful when you're doing that. I've drawn my own patterns, and like I say, just from frozen birds, or been out on a hunting trip and come back and I got a nice fresh bird, I'll sit down and sketch some stuff right from that bird.
I've got all my old DU magazines. I use you find a nice picture of a bird,
sure.
I would cut it out, and then I've got a folder for each species. This is kind of old school.
No, but
because
that's
the
a
digital's
filing,
available. But any picture that kind of captures your attention, because that's the spark you're looking for, a good profile, something that really grabs your attention. I'll clip it out, put it in there. Then when I'm doing a mallard, I pull out the mallard.
Go through it.
I just kind of look for inspiration in there.
Sure. And now you could have, like, just like Tom was saying, I know I have a folder still in the, in my cabinet that has some species, but then I have folders now on my hard drive of just all pictures on the computer. So I have it both. Yeah. So go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, I was going to say the other thing, too, is there's some great reference material for bills, like cast bills that are out there.
Oh,
either
yeah.
from a
That's a good
taxidermy
point.
supply house,
Oh, yeah.
or there was some guys that were doing specifically for carvers. And to have that in front of you, from like it's a casting from a fresh bird.
That's right, a real bird.
Yeah, so it's not shrunk the way a mounted bird might
That's
be
right.
if they're not using a cast head
You
in
can
it.
absolutely use that kind of stuff.
And
There's
you get
no doubt.
eye placement, the distance between the eyes. You get some really critical measurements right off that.
Yeah, I mean, you can be very efficient at not screwing up having those kind of measurements. You know what I mean? Like, listen, making sure that your eyes on both sides are exactly where they should be. I mean, I'm talking for people just starting. Like, I remember just starting, and that was one of the hardest things. Like,
That's not easy. Yeah.
Getting it, you have to be, it is precise, because if one's, you can't.
And it's easy to convince yourself
That it looks
after
right.
you've put the effort into it. You're twisting it around. Yeah, I think
The worst thing
It's not even
happens
close.
is you're doing that and you're fighting for an hour and a half trying to get the eyes straight, and then your wife walks downstairs and said the eyes are crooked,
Yeah.
just like that.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were convinced it looked good, and she called you out in 20
Oh,
seconds.
yeah.
You're like, and she's not carving.
Yeah.
She just goes, "Hey, those are off," and you walk back and you go,
No, my
yeah, they are.
response is no, they're not.
I think. There's a ton of information we covered. I don't think there's anything we missed. If you guys have anything to add at the end, we covered front to back about carving, getting started. If you do carve, here's some helpful things, like, and feel free that anybody out there that you can 100% get a hold of any of these guys at any time. Absolutely. Or any carver near you that you think could be helpful. And it's so easy now. You make a post and you put up a video of whatever, doing
How to detail
head,
a bill,
like
or how to
whatever.
Yeah.
And somebody has a question, like, and throws it on your post, and you go, "Oh, try this." Like, that's instant. Like, that doesn't, like, how crazy that is to be that fortunate to get that information that quick. Because if I say, "Oh, hey Tom, what should I do here?" "Oh, just try this," and I'm like, "Holy crap!" Like, that was 2 minutes. Whereas, like, back in the day, you'd be like, Pat, you were talking about sending a letter to somebody and hoping you get something back.
Yeah.
Like, like the pigeon took it over there and got it over to his house, and then the pigeon's coming back. It's a month before you get an answer, and you're sitting on doing a bird. Like, this is instant information.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have a carving club close to them,
And
or
absolutely.
people that they can carve and learn from. So
Yeah. No, we are a
Super
community.
handy.
It's very far stretched, but we're definitely a community all across North America and the world. It's, but I think if I can, in terms of material and everything else, just add one other thing, is that it doesn't matter if you're doing a gunning bird or a full decorative bird, don't cheap out on the eyes. I see guys, and they'll
Agreed.
talk about
That's a good
spending
point.
hundreds of hours on a bird, and then they put in a $2 pair of eyes. And it's something. It's the only piece that you can buy and use on your piece, and it adds so much life.
it's a big part of conveying life.
Yeah. Oh,
for
in
sure.
in your carving.
That goes on the taxidermy side too, because I don't know if you've ever seen, like, I always see it. The worst time I see it is in the cats, like when they do a cat,
Oh, yeah.
and they do like a bobcat. He's kind of like winking at you, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Those are the wrong eyes." I think you have goat eyes in that thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think you got the wrong ones.
Yeah, no, it's as a judge. It's you look at a piece and it's like the guy put so much time and effort
And
into
then
it.
crap eyes.
And then crap eyes, and then he leaves paint on the eyes.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, they wanted to save $5 or $6.
Yeah. The difference between a good pair
Nothing,
of eyes and,
right.
and a cheap pair of eyes is maybe $6.
Yeah.
And like I say, I think I'm worth the $6.
Yeah.
I think you are too, Wayne. All right, listen, that's an incredible amount of information from Wayne Simpkin, Pat Godden, Tom Christie. I'm just the moderator. Holy crap. What an honor, fellas. Honest to God, like, this is cool. Big shout outs to Jamie Welsh, who could not be here.
Yeah.
And Jamie's another one you can get a hold of and talk to. He's down in South Carolina, and you could always get a hold of him or any of these guys. And hopefully that helps you out in your, if you want to carve, if you want to get started, whatever. This is generational knowledge here that's years upon years. I won't date anybody, but we got a lot of info right here. So use them, use it. Appreciate you checking us out. It's Final Approach.